Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're doing alright. I actually have a 1 review, 2 arc review, and 3 an on-time arc review. It's crazy. I'm here to talk today about Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. Now, the first thing that I want to say, just out the bat, is I am not the target audience of this book. I am an adult, and this is a young adult book, which is aimed at teenagers. I am very white, and I feel like this book, while not necessarily exclusively aimed at Black or African American kids today, is very heavily intended to be read by that community, and I am not a part of that. And in general, the only reason that this really is something that I wanted to pick up and wanted to really get my hands on it was so that I would be able to sell it as a bookseller. Now, as a white person, I can't talk about the contents of this book and how true it is to the reality of inner city kids today. It takes place in the 90s, so even back in the 90s, I can't talk about that. That's not where I came from. It's not the community I came from. I'm not even going to attempt to touch that. If you want to hear people talking about that, I behoove you to go and seek out folks who are giving own voices reviews. I'm just going to talk about this from the perspective of somebody who has ingested a bunch of books, including Angie Thomas's debut book, The Hate U Give, that this is a prequel of, and sort of talk about how this one's really interesting, and I think in a lot of ways better or perhaps more helpful than The Hate U Give may have been, but for different reasons. I don't think that this book could have been published if The Hate U Give had not been published. If Angie Thomas was not a household name in YA literature, if the Black Lives Matter movement hadn't been resurfaced quite as much as it was this summer. This is a book that is going to alienate a large demographic of readers from the get-go. It's written with quite strong AAVE vernacular, so me reading it, I'm reading in a way of speech that is not normal to me, it's not natural to me, it is not where I come from, and it's something that I don't have to take in a lot of. It is very common to the parts of the communities that this takes place in. The Hate U Give was much more palatable in that sense. And I say palatable, not that this is like terrible writing or bad grammar or anything like that. It is very much set in a particular voice, which for some people might not be comfortable to read. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Did I get over that? Read the whole thing? Yes. Is it completely understandable to anybody? Yes, of course. But there's going to be people who will find that uncomfortable to read, and in a publishing industry who is interested in making money, that's not necessarily what they want. And that's what I mean why I say that this book probably would not have been published, because they're thinking of trying to be as marketable as possible. They wanted to hit as many shelves as possible. And what that usually means is predominantly white audience. That's generally what they're looking for. That's one of the reasons why I did a video where I talked about that New York Times article where we were talking about why publishing is so white. These sort of texts probably would not have happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and if it wasn't Angie Thomas specifically writing it, probably would not have come out. Is that problematic? So much. Super problematic. I think that this type of story should be out, and more books should be written in that sort of dialect, and should be taken as definitely important and helpful to those communities. So I'm just saying that. I'm putting that on the table. I am acknowledging this as something problematic that is definitely true of the publishing industry. For kids who are going to be reading this, who may not understand what it's like to be in an inner city. They might be from a suburb, they might be white kids, and they read this. It gives them a glimpse into what life could be like for somebody who is there, what it's like to be sort of generationally stuck in a gang, for what it's like to see all of your peers who have decided to sell drugs on the street, making money, getting the newest outfits, the coolest shoes, and you're stuck at your dead-end job, quote-unquote dead-end job, making pennies on the dollar to what they're making, and feeling left out. And on top of that, they're sort of pushing you and saying that you're not doing the right thing, that you're a scaredy cat, that you're a loser. All of that peer pressure that comes with not participating in what is very integral to their community, part of their life. It's something that's there. It's something that you can understand and see how that happens, how, like, it can be unfathomable to think, well, I would never do drugs, or I would never sell drugs. But when you live in that community and it is common parlance and everybody's doing it and your family is doing it and you're sort of handed this mantle of everybody's doing this and it's the cool thing to do, and it's what you're expected to do, why that would come to be. This is also a very good example of how one can sort of take that mantle and give it up. And I think that's really what Angie Thomas was doing with this one, was to give kids an example of how one might get out, quote unquote, of that lifestyle. Which is important, of course, to show that there is a valid way. To also acknowledge that that is difficult. That is not something easily done. That is something that has so many barricades to exit, literally. It also shows that in order to escape that, there are a lot of things that need to be happening in your favor. While there are a lot of things happening here that would make it harder for him to leave that lifestyle, he does also have a lot of privileges that some people don't have access to. A family that's caring, that is willing to help support him. A neighbor who's willing to give him a job. All of these things that some people just don't have the resources. They just don't have it. There's characters in here who get disowned by their family members. There's characters in here whose family members think it's their job to just deal with it on their own and not try and help. So we see that in some of the characters and their actions being reflected in that as well. If you read The Hate U Give, you know how this book is going to end. And even if you haven't read The Hate U Give, it's a hopeful ending, right? You're not going into this thinking that your main character is going to be shot dead on a street corner. But there are elements of this that still caused me anxiety and tension, which is really speaking to Angie Thomas's writing, that she was able to keep me wondering, oh no, what's going to happen to him? Because I care about him and his outcome and him being able to move on with his life and you know, be free of the shackles of that sort of thing. And the other thing that I really appreciated about this was that he wanted to give back to his community, and that was also something that was very prevalent in The Hate U Give, that these characters, while being quote-unquote more successful, are still very much rooted in their lower income community, their inner city community, and wanting to take their resources and put them back into that community to help vitalize everybody, and not just bail as soon as they have the ability to. Not to say that that isn't also an option. If you are living in an area where shootings happen and innocent bystanders are getting hit, it makes sense why you would want to also leave the area. But I appreciate that she's saying you don't have to abandon friends and family in order to be successful. You can stay and help try and give hands to other folks that may be struggling and needing that help up and out of those situations. There is also a small discussion about sexuality within here, not from the protagonist's point of view, but from his mother's point of view. And I really appreciated that, especially because I know that the queer community, especially within African American and Black communities, is very much frowned upon in a way that in some white communities has started to step away, not entirely. As someone who is in LGBTQIA plus umbrella, obviously there's still stigma and things going on even today. But I know from the discourse of my peers and of people of color who I've heard speak about it, that there's more stigma in their communities than there is necessarily in the white communities, and seeing that here was a positive representation. So you get to see people reacting positively to it and accepting of it, rather than violence towards it or negativity towards it. It was just a representation, positive response to it, A+, worthwhile. I'm proud of it for being there. I can't really rate this book. I really enjoyed it. I think it will be super powerful. I can see why this would be very helpful to the demographic that it is aiming itself towards. I also think that there are white folks that will pick this up because Angie Thomas's first book was so palatable to a very wide audience. Some of them may choose to put it down because of the vernacular that it is written in, or they may choose to put it down because it is not nearly as safe as The Hate U Give was in that aspect. I think you should try and push through, because it's definitely still worthwhile in order to better understand the systems in place both for and against people of color in our country today. For teachers or librarians, this is definitely one that I think that you should pick up and consider adding to your libraries or your classrooms. It's one that I think will help anybody across the board be more empathetic towards others. It's one that will help give positive examples of how to deal with life struggles. Maverick has 2 kids and he's 17. Well, he has 1 child that is born and another on the way from 2 different women. He's struggling in school and to take care of his children. It shows him flunking out of school, but being immediately willing to go in and get his GED in order to continue to better himself. It shows characters that want to go to college as well, so it shows them doing that. It shows Black women who are in the medical field or who want to strive to be in the medical field. It shows Black men who are entrepreneurs and business owners. It's showing Black people that they can be more than just gangbangers, while still being a novel that centers around that lifestyle or that community in general. I think that's completely worthwhile to look at as something, as an option. Like, it's something to give people hope, right? So yes, if your teachers think of it as that way, think of it as a way to help show people other ways of life. Think of it as showing a way that different things are passed on generationally, including trauma, but also how it shows there's cycles within communities, as well as like school to prison pipeline type things, where you see these kids that are in school and they're eventually going to get out of school and they're doing all of these behaviors that will get them thrown into prison, where they are in prison for the rest of their lives and they are never able to do anything with their lives. It's a discussion of that as well. It's a discussion of how kids lose their parents, how either through violence or through prison, he doesn't want his kids to grow up without a dad. Even though he still has a relatively good relationship with his father, he does still have the knowledge and the experience of having lost his father when he went to prison when he was 8 years old. It's something to acknowledge and to show in this novel that, you know, it's there. There's even a discussion on how he's not able to get resources that a single mother would get, even though he is the one taking care of his child, and the mother has essentially relinquished most of the control over the child. She doesn't even want to see the child in a lot of cases for most of the book, not all of the book, but she is still receiving benefits from having that child, and he can't until legally she does something to relinquish that. He can't get food stamps. He can't get the support that is in place from the government for single parents trying to raise children. All in all, I think this book is really important, and I'm glad that it got published. It had so many things that would have been held against it for so many years in the publishing industry, and I think after the year that we had in 2020, it's perhaps going to be more successful than it may have been without that. Not to say that we needed to have any of that stuff, and especially with The Hate U Give being as popular as it was, talking about BLM as well, this being tied to that doesn't hurt it. It's definitely going to help it as far as marketability, but it's something that we need to see, something that more people need to read, and I think everybody should pick it up, even if it is just to see a snippet of what it's like to be Black in America, what it's like to be told before you go on a drive how to drive so that you don't get pulled over by the cops for fear of being pulled over by the cops. All of that stuff. So yes, Concrete Rose. Very good. I'm not going to give you a number. I can't really speak to the contents of it in that case. I'm just saying it's good and it's important and it's something that people should read. So there you go. That was my review of Concrete Rose. Gretchen and I will be back on Friday with an announcement, because we have done something that other folks should join in with us on. I hope that you enjoy that, and also that you look forward to more content from us in the new year. I also wanted to do a video where I talked about my 2021 reading plans, but when I'm only posting one video a week, I feel like it's going to be too too late next week to talk about it, but I might post something at some point where I talk about the different things that I'm planning to do for 2021. I hope you guys are doing well, even with everything that was going on, especially with last week in America. Last Wednesday was rough. It was rough. Let's just say that. I will talk to you again soon.